Hello everyone, I'm Kroof and I'm currently not wearing any pants. Transition. What is popping, everyone? Welcome to this fun little Guild Wars 2 video where I am not putting a lot of effort. Well, I don't want to say effort. It's just more for fun. Today I will be giving my opinion on my favorite Heart of Thorns elite specializations and ranking them with the classic tier ranking that everybody seems to be using now. And I gotta say, it is visually satisfying. So I'm going to be using the same thing. And without further ado, let's begin ranking. It's in a PvE setting. I also probably should have mentioned this. This is a PvE ranking. Okay. Hello, everyone. So, I am just going to be going through and providing my opinion on how the current elite specializations are, ad-libbing them, being fun, basically. And of course, we're starting with the Chrono Mansur, because the Chrono Mansur was the one who was first revealed to us. And I think, I don't really need a lot of explanation for this. And I don't think many people should need a lot of explanation for this. This is kind of like a freebie. The Chrono Mansurs are S tier for multiple reasons. Their boon uptime, their potential and damage, their tanking, their sustain. They have literally outlived all of the elite specializations. Yes, they've been nerfed. Yes, they've been changed. But 99% of the time, they're still needed and they're still wanted. So, Chrono Mansurs, congratulations, y'all did that. Great boon up time, fun to play, very intricate. You can either go very baseline, not a lot of stuff to do, focusing on slows and doing damage, or you could go and take it to the next level in terms of being a tank and trying to micromanage boons and boon sharing and extending boons and all that good stuff. So, Chrono Mansurs all did that. Next one on the list, I think from memory. I'm gonna try and go off of memory of it being unveiled. I think the next one was Reaper. Okay, with Reaper, I think Reaper is slightly more A tier. It mostly because it had its issue with Connie DPS. Deathly Chill is still in the game, but it's such a non-grandmaster at this point that they honestly should change it. But overall, I really enjoy Reaper. I think it's strong, and I think you have pretty much one solid build in terms of damage. Going Reaper's Onslaught, taking the middle tier where you do more damage critical hits. You could do Soul Eater if you just want to do a little bit extra damage in melee range. And Augury of Death if you want to have a cooldown on your shouts. I'd like to see Blighter's Boon, Reaper's Pursuit, and maybe just a couple other tweaks and changes. But I think overall the base Reaper Shroud is really great. It does a lot of damage, and it's fairly easy to get into in terms of not having so many mechanics as the Chrono Mansur does, for players to get into and just get their footing. So I think Reaper, it's an A tier. It's pretty good. Next up, I think in terms of unveiling, was the Dragon Hunter. Same with the Reaper. I'm gonna put Dragon Hunter in the A tier. As of right now, it's kind of like an A minus, almost a B. They have good damage. However, the longbow is a little clunky, and some traits could use a bit of a buff, especially Hunter's Preparation. I don't see a lot of people taking it, and I think it's kind of for it to have never been touched since its conception is a little weird in terms of just the modern Guild Wars 2 era. the contemporary Guild Wars 2 era. I think there are some trait areas which could be brushed up, like Bulwark. It's a nice ability and it's arguably strong, but I think it needs another function to give it a bit more of a boost, because right now people are just taking the damaging traits to affect cooldowns on traps to deal more damage to crippled foes and to do more damage to enemies who are speared with your F1. So right now Dragon Hunter is good in terms of damage, but the longbow is kind of where I'm having an issue. I think the longbow needs a bit more of a brush up. Give it another ability. Give it something new. Hunter's Ward could be changed into something else. It's definitely not the longbow of, say, the Ranger, and it doesn't have to be, but it's definitely neither as damaging, as fast, and if it's going to be slower paced abilities, make them do a bit more damage. That's all I gotta say. Next up, we have, I think it was the Tempest? We might be going slightly out of order here now, but after this, I only know the first three and then the last one. But let's just do the Tempest. We might as well. Now, for the Tempest, I'm actually gonna put it at S tier. Is that controversial? Is that, am I deviating now? This is where the opinion pieces come in. Am I deviating from the norm? I think that Tempest started out as a BA, you know, when it was first released. But I think in terms of its rework with the auras, the increases and changes to the damaging aspects, I think Tempest provides a really good niche for Elementalist players. The overloads are fantastic. They have even been buffing overloads, adding new functionality to the overloads. I mean, their elite shout can now apply fury. You can keep up 25 stacks of might. You can share the might. You can share the fury. And then you can go into your Earth Warhorn and extend boons on 10 players by 3 seconds. So it's kind of competing with Chrono Mansur in a way, in terms of its boon application with a select few boons. Chrono Mansur does quickness and alacrity. Tempest focuses on, I'd say, fury, might, and maybe a little bit of protection. But overall, Tempest is really strong, and I think people sometimes overlook Tempest. Is that such a controversial thing to say, that people overlook Tempest? I'm not saying everyone is, but I don't think I'm seeing as much praise to Tempest in terms of people needing a healer. And in terms of damage, it's not the worst. Its focus isn't on damage, but you have areas where you can do effective damage, especially with the new Grandmaster, that, you know, 7% damage. Is it 7 or 10% increased flat and condi damage after you overload? I think in terms of a trait that could be reworked, I think it's focused singularity. The middle Grandmaster trait. The middle Grandmaster trait. The middle Grandmaster trait is a little weird. I don't know if a lot of people even pick it for PvP. They might, but whenever I'm doing Tempest PvP, I tend to go with Elemental Bastion and or new damaging one. So in all, I think Tempest is pretty solid though. I think it's one of the S tiers, in all honesty. I'm gonna say it. I think it's S tier. Next might have been, what? I think it was Daredevil. It might have been Scrapper. I might have messed up the order slightly, but let's just tackle Scrapper because I feel like it might have been it. Oh. I think it might have been Herald. We're gonna go with Herald because we're gonna do Herald. Okay. In terms of the Herald within a PvE setting, I also probably should have mentioned this. This is a PvE ranking. I think I'm gonna select B tier. It's not bad, but it still has some glaring issues. I think number one, the shield. The shield's fourth ability is cool, but it takes quite a long time to travel. and its protection application only lasts a very short amount of time, and it has an arguably kind of long cooldown. If it had a second charge, that could be interesting. And of course, the Herald's 5th ability is still a little weird. It just makes you invulnerable for 2 seconds and heals you, but the healing isn't even that great necessarily. But I don't think the shield is trash. I just think the shield is very underperforming. Also because it doesn't necessarily have a main hand weapon that it parallels in terms of if you want to go protection or if you want to go as like a tankier. You don't have a, well, then you have a main hand, but it's condition damage. You don't have like a defensive main hand necessarily. And you don't necessarily have a support main hand, like you don't have a scepter. So in terms of that, the weapons, it's a bit iffy. In terms of the traits, they're still kind of underperforming. Is it just me? The healing aspect is fantastic. The extra defense with the upkeep is nice, and the speed. The facet interactions still feel a little weak. There's a one that's just like heal when you use a consume. Okay. It seems a little flat, and I don't know. I don't want them to overpower it necessarily, but I just don't think it's as impactful for a Revenant as it needs to be. I think Revenant as a class already has its issues, but I don't think Herald improves the issues, but I don't think it necessarily adds a lot of issues as well. The consumes and the boon up time on the facets, they're nice. You have more protection, you have might, you have swiftness, you have fury, and you have regen. And in all, there are some facet, like the utility applications and the profession mechanic with the F2. I think those are pretty solid. But in all, I think you can really only go with a boon up time support in terms of the Herald. And I think that's okay, but I do think the defensive applications with the Herald could be improved. Next up, let us tackle I think next up was Berserker. And once again, I'm putting Berserker at B. I think Berserker, in terms of its rework in PvP, it's good. It's good. Actually, okay, in terms of B, I think it's a B plus A minus. But there's no really delineation, so I'm gonna keep it at a B plus. I think Berserker is really strong in terms of its power in PvP. However, this is a PvE focused scenario. And I don't necessarily know how well Berserker's performing in raids. I think they are doing pretty well, honestly. Condition damage is good. It's easy. Power is good. It's fairly easy to get into. You just run Greatsword. But for the sake of the other weapons and their applications and their primal Zerks and their Berserker abilities, I think they're called Primal Rage abilities, they could use a little bit of a retuning, like the axe skill, maybe the mace and the rifle. In terms of condition damage, the sword and the torch and the longbow are great. So I'm having a lot of fun playing condition. I'm having a lot of fun playing power. Do I think it's a standout in terms of the whole elite specializations with Heart of Thorns? Not necessarily. So maybe that's why I'm also putting it B. It's a solid ability and elite spec for warriors, but I don't think it's necessarily a standout in terms of the whole lineup. It's fair and it's effective and it's good. Maybe a couple tweaks with traits and their utility skills as a whole. Some utility skills, functionalities, be updated a little bit. Skill where you punch people and they become a projectile. Sundering Leap. I think those are the main ones that I'm like, you could add a little bit more damage, or make them add a bit more seconds to your berserking meter, and so on and so forth. Okay, next up, we're going to be tackling... Who's left? Rapper, I think, is next. Scrapper, I... It's kind of... I feel like it's a B, but it could also be C. In terms of a PvE mindset, I think it's C. It's passable. Keep in mind, like the actual grading scale in America, C is average, B is above average, A is excellent. We don't have S, but in terms of the fictional S, it's like above and beyond. I think for Scrapper, what it sets out to be a tank. However, tanking in PvE is really weird. It's not consistent. You don't have a normal taunt, which I really think they should rework the taunt condition in PvE. I think it would be a fantastic change for people who want to tank. They fulfilled their needs for people who want to play damage, because damage was the only thing in core Guild Wars 2. They fulfilled people's needs or desires to heal with implementing more healing abilities, stronger trait lines focused on healing and support, boon application, uptime, and healing over time, and so on and so forth. They haven't really fulfilled on the tanking fantasy, I think. They haven't given people ample access to be able to taunt or to control enemies and say, hey, look at me. Especially in terms of a raiding scenario. Sometimes it's not consistent. Sometimes it's toughness tanking, oftentimes it's random. Sometimes you have to pick up a thing that says, I'm a tank. And I think that is probably the best way to go. You have to assign yourself as a tank. But I also think they could rework taunt as a PvE trait or a condition to force enemies to attack you for its duration. And then also give these specializations easier ways to apply taunt, to be like, hey, come and attack me for these 4 seconds or 5 seconds, but you have to kind of upkeep that. And it could be coded in ways like if an enemy is taunted, you have a greater chance of maintaining that aggro even after it falls off. But in terms of its traits, it's very tanky, and it does damage, and it can apply stability. It's passable. But I don't think the Scrapper reflects the current PvE endgame in Guild Wars 2, in raiding, in strike missions, and in the open world. It's very hard to actually tank. Even in the open world, they have like Defiance bars, and then, taunt will just impact the Defiance bar and not focus the target onto yourself, if that makes sense. So in the whole lineup, Scrapper is good, but it's not good in the world of Guild Wars 2 right now. That's why I'm putting it a C. You could play Scrapper. Scrapper's good in PvP because it's very tanky. Scrapper's very good, probably, I think in World vs. World. I don't know about World vs. World. World vs. World is a whole other area that I'm not, like, really invested in, and I don't know much about. So, that's why. And then, next, the penultimate one is Daredevil. I think I'm putting Daredevil at a B again, which is fair. I think overall this has been a very healthy lineup. You have a couple standouts, and then you have a couple, more moderate ones. I don't think anyone's failing right now, which is good. But I think Daredevil overall, its power is really good. You have a lot of power. In terms of its sustained power in PvE, I just think of staff auto-attacking. I think you could put more power in the vault, the staff 5 skill. The change to the steel, I think, was pretty fair in terms of its profession trade-off, and it plays into that Daredevil fantasy where you're a bit more of a melee combatant. Its utility skills could be, improved, I think. Distracting Daggers is nice for its CC application. Bandit's defense, it's reactionary, but it is a defense skill. You know what? I think the utility skills are pretty nice. The elite skill in PvE, I think, needs to have more power in the final strike in PvE because you don't often down players. It's a nice CC skill for the first 2 strikes, but the final strike always feels weak because you're never downing players in PvE. You're just dealing damage. If it dealt damage, or if it applied vulnerability or gave you, like, I don't know, some might, that would be interesting. But Daredevil, I think, is pretty fair. The condition Daredevil is strong, but I don't think it's as much of a focal point. It might be for those who wish to play it, but I think in terms of condition damage with Thief, you're really stuck with Dagger. But the main hand dagger is slightly interesting because it's like power, but you get a poison stack on the final hit. Your second ability is a flat power ability that scales off of the health of the enemy, so you don't often want to use it because it's also not as strong to begin with, though you can spam it. So you're really left going dagger, spamming your dagger third skill, and dodging and throwing your dagger utilities. There's 2 dagger. I think distracting daggers is a CC, and there's another dagger ability with the conditions. You know what I mean? So I think Daredevil is fair. A B ranking. And then finally for the Druid. The Druid was the final one to be unveiled, and I think Druid is S tier or A plus tier. I'm just gonna say S because Druid is such a staple in terms of Chrono Mansur and Druid. Druid did go through its times where it was a bit more questionable. However, Druid, you know, stayed relevant and it stayed powerful for quite a time. It did have its pet being weakened, which is, I think, a fair trade-off. Celestial Avatar, I have my issues with in terms of its duration and not being able to maintain it. The auto attack in Celestial Avatar is also not even an auto attack because you typically auto attack with the second ability, Seed of Life. The staff could have some improvements. And I think the utilities, they're glyphs, and it's a ranged spec, so why not have the utilities be cast at range? Or at least some of them be cast at range. I think that'd be really cool and really nice. I have a whole rework of the Druid on my channel as well, if you'd like to go check that out. It'll probably be in the upper right-hand corner or recommended after this video, if you'd like to go see my opinions on the Druid. However, I think the traits and the boon uptime and the healing that it does do right now still constitutes it as being an S tier. Despite the areas in terms of refinement and adding more flavor and adding an excitement and flow to the class, I think Druid is still strong for the might it provides, the fury it provides on certain pets, the protection, the might, the other applications with its spirits. I think the elite glyph could be a little bit better. You typically want to save it for Celestial Avatar when you're about to end, because then you're still getting the effect of when you're channeling it from Celestial Avatar, even though you're outside of Celestial Avatar. But I think overall, Druid is good. 3, 6, 9. I've got all of the elite specs. This is how I would rank my Heart of Thorns elite specializations in terms of the current era, and I think this is overall a very healthy lineup for Heart of Thorns PvE. Chrono Mansur, Tempest, Druid being the outstanding ones currently, in my opinion. The A tier being the, you know, overperforming, still good, maybe have 1 or 2 areas where you could be improved in terms of 1 or 2 traits, 1 or 2 utilities, 1 or 2 weapon changes. But this being Reaper and Dragon Hunter, I think they're still really good. They have a lot of damage and they do what they want to do effectively. Be also really cool if Dragon Hunter traps could be placed at range. If you could change Hunter's Fortification trait to also focus in on the traps. Again, because it's the top line, it's trap focused. If you could like spell cast them at range, that'd be cool. You could steal that idea. In terms of the above average, not as powerful, but still, you know, fair and good, Herald, Berserker, and Daredevil. I think those are, you know, the safer ones, the well-balanced area. You typically want to be in the B-A range. The underperforming one out of this bunch, I would have to say, is Scrapper. Scrapper just, it needs In terms of PvE, it's not called for, is what I'm saying. You can run it and you can have fun with it, but there's not a need for it, I would say. You could focus on boon up times, but that is mostly an elixir support, and I don't know. Its tanking functionality, its tanky control aspect isn't as needed. I don't know what else to say other than, like, I don't feel like it's... My chair was squeaking and it was getting on my nerves. I just don't feel like it's, you know, at its potential. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little tier ranking. I hope you liked it. Like the video if you liked it. Comment down below your thoughts on the Heart of Thorns ranking. I'll be doing a Path of Fire one, don't you worry. And subscribe for more content. All my links down below. My Patreon, my Twitch, my Twitter, and my Discord. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone.